Hey, everybody, welcome to Everyday Fi. I'm your host, Megan Combs, and I'm here to say that you do not need a $1 million book deal or a famous blog to reach financial independence. By exploring the lives of everyday people pursuing Fi, I can show you how to forge your own path to financial freedom the everyday way. Also, if you'd like to support the show, you can now check out patreon.com/everydayfi podcast, where you can listen to all new episodes after February 1st, ad-free. And I am posting bonus content like interviews with experts, my retirement tell-all, and more. I also have merch, which is awesome. I actually ordered a t-shirt for myself. It looks pretty good. You can get t-shirts, mugs, stickers, tote bags, all kinds of stuff at TeePublic, and I have all these links in my show notes if you want to check it out. Today, I am back with my buddy Mitch, and we are talking about balancing Fi when one spouse quits working and stays at home. So, hey, Mitch, how you doing?
I'm good. It's freezing. It's winter. It's Minnesota. And I'm home after being gone, 9 out of the last 12 days. So it's pretty exciting and back to work and immediately taking a break to chat with you today. So I'm great. How are you?
Yeah, I'm pretty good. I mean, I'm not working anymore, so we're recording this at 9 a.m. on a Tuesday, which is crazy and awesome and feels so much better than my prior job. Yeah, also, I feel so bad for you because you're coming back to Minnesota when it's freezing after going to Costa Rica for, I guess, 9 days is what you're saying, but or however long you were in Costa Rica, but that's I feel bad for you because you showed me some of those pictures and it looked like so much fun. So much fun. How was that trip?
It was incredible. It was 4 nights, 5 days. I was gone the week prior for a work event and home for a few days in between. So it was, I think, a 120-degree swing from leaving Costa Rica to when we arrived in Minnesota. And I came home literally wearing shorts and a polo shirt. And the flight attendants and the pilots were like, "Are you ready for this?" And I said, "I was born here." And I just walked off the plane, and it was very cold, even in the jetway, but I just toughened it up, stone cold face. And I did have clothes to put on for the commute home, but I got into a warm Uber and they drove me 11 minutes to my house. It was fine. So, but it was an incredible
Yeah,
trip.
that's awesome. Like instant regret when you're like, I'm born here, and then you go outside and you're like, instant regret, but I'm not gonna show it. I'm not gonna show it. That's hilarious. I can't imagine what your body went through. It was probably completely shook. It was like, ah.
The worst
So, or
part
at
was
least mine would have
my
been.
my cold plunge the next morning was actually the worst part because I'd had whatever 4 or 5 days off while I was in Charlotte for work. Came home for 3 days. It's hard to get back into cold plunging. My wife leaves it at 42 degrees even when I'm gone. She doesn't like turn it up to make it easier on me when I get home. So it was miserable. Then I go and spend 5 days in Costa Rica in a perfect temperature thermal river and pools and all this stuff. And then I get home at 9:30 at night on a Friday, and Saturday morning I'm back in my 42-degree freezing cold tub, and it was brutal, but very refreshing, and it's good for you. So
You could have just cold plunged in your like front yard in the snow.
I
Just
I
like
think
a Mitch outline in the snow.
yeah, there's some science to that, but we'll leave that to like the Huberman lab to
Yeah, we are not medical scientists
yeah
here.
yeah
Yeah.
debunk your theory. That's what I was trying to land on.
Oh, yeah. Okay, cool. So let's get to our topic then. So, like I said, we're going to talk about when one spouse decides to quit working and stay at home. And so, like, this is kind of an interesting topic because, in a traditional sense, people who are not on the five path might be like, oh, well, just one person is becoming a stay at home mom or dad. And I hate that like just phrase because it's like it makes it seem like the person who's doing that is less valuable or contributing less to the household, and I'm like, I don't know, I think raising kids is probably a harder job than anything you'll ever do, but anyway, but it's for the Fi community, I feel like this is a state of Coast Fi. So Coast Fi, just to remind people, is when you have enough in your retirement accounts where you don't have to contribute anymore and you will hit traditional retirement at 59 and a half or 65, whichever age you you aim for. And a lot of the time people can like go down to lower paying work or part-time work to just cover their expenses. And so with like one spouse going to no work and another spouse continuing to work, you kind of do that as a couple instead of both going down to part-time work. And so I see it as a way of coast-fying. So I don't know, Mitch, if you agree with that or if you see that differently, but that's kind of how I see it.
I don't know that I ever would have drawn the same conclusion, but when we were rigorously prepping for this episode, whatever, 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago, you put it in that framework, and I said, yeah, that tracks. Like I can totally see that. So, I, what got me there actually is what you said at the close of your remarks, which is instead of, let's just say there's a couple that has no interest in having kids. So there is not a catalyst for one or the other to have a reason to stay home other than maybe burn out for a time period or something. The alternative would probably be you look at each other and say, you know what, I think we're both ready to slow down. Let's, have waffles on Wednesday or, whatever. And they make that decision to go do the rock climbing gig or become a Peloton instructor, whatever your thing is, work part time, dramatically reduce your income and live off part of your assets. But I do think this is different, but I can see the parallel for sure. So, and having been through it in different phases and for different reasons, I think we have different lived experiences, but unique in how we kind of have some of the same thought processes along the way. So, and I do want to say the just comment you made earlier, 100%. Like, it's not I'm just staying at home. Like, it's a choice to invest in your relationship with your child. It's a choice to invest in the level of education and attention they're going to get and set them up for a different experience when they do flee the coop at kindergarten or preschool or whenever it is that you kind of step back and they become more in the hands of whoever you put them in for that phase of their education. So somewhere in that word salad was a good reality, but it's definitely not just. So I don't know what you think about that or where you'd like to start next.
Yeah, I mean, I think you mentioned different backgrounds. So I think we did want to talk about like our family backgrounds, like ours as in like each of us as the couple. Like your wife's family grew up a certain way, you grew up a certain way, I grew up a certain way, Chris grew up a certain way. And so how do these like different backgrounds kind of feed into the dynamics that you have as a couple or as a spousal dynamic? And since I'm talking, I'll just go first. Sorry, Mitch. And so the way that my parents work, so Chris and I both were kids of divorce. My parents got divorced when I was 3 years old. So like I never had two parents in the house. I always had a single mom. It was stressful as heck for her all the time. But she was also a career person. Like she became CFO when she was in her like 30s or 40s. Like she was very young and became a CFO. She even like told me one time that she negotiated a salary higher than a CEO one time because she was just so driven. But then she also had two kids. And so what I remember as a kid is a mom who was never there and always working and who basically saw us as like stressors in her life. And so that was not fun. And my mom and I are fine now. Like we've repaired that relationship. We've talked it through and all of that stuff. So don't worry guys. We're fine. And then I had a dad who was less present. I only saw him, during the summer. I really, so he didn't really raise me. He only saw me during the time when I wasn't in school. And so there wasn't a lot that he had to do. And it was like we would play at the pool, watch Nickelodeon, and go to summer camps. Like that was it. And he saw us for 2 months. I did live with him in high school for a little while, so he did shape that part of my life, and it was only 3 years in high school, but it it was basically just like kind of an absentee-ish father. So that dynamic, like the way that my husband and I are married, I never had that when I was growing up. My dad did marry my stepmom, but again, like it wasn't really I didn't see them that often. So there was that difference, and then Chris, his family, his parents got divorced when he was 8, and it was kind of the opposite, so he went and lived with his dad and stepmom, and I won't, like, go into why, and then he hardly ever saw his mom, he only saw her once a month, and so he didn't get a whole lot of time with her either, and that was not her choice, like, she wanted to see him more, but there was, like, a whole debacle that happened with that divorce that prevented it, And so we both are children of, like, not really seeing a great dynamic in the household. I guess him and his stepmom, like his dad and his stepmom, sure they were married, but his stepmom was his stepmom. She wasn't his mom. She was kind of like he still to this day doesn't really know much about her. He doesn't know her grandparents' names. He doesn't know she has other kids. Like she was very just standoffish, didn't really parent. And so it was a very strange dynamic. And so that's I don't know how he and I ended up in an extremely healthy, like, great relationship, but that was our background. So, what was y'all's, Mitch?
Before I get into mine, I want to mention it's so funny you finished the way that you did there because I was thinking in my head, it's very interesting. We just had some very deep conversations on our Costa Rica trip with the other couple that we were with because we're all turning 40. We're talking about the next decade of our life and we're talking about things we're proud of and whatever. And Liz mentioned to our friends, like, in some response to something we were talking about, like, it really is interesting, like, how strong of a dad I've turned out to be and how squared away of a husband that I am, having never seen success in either of those categories, right? So it's just funny to hear you say kind of the same thing. Like, how did we end up here from two kind of messed up places? And I think we've talked about this before, like on the money path.
Therapy.
Yeah, I think
Therapy.
I think we've talked on the money path before. Like, you either follow in the footsteps that you saw, or you sprint the other direction. It seems like, and there's rarely an in between, other than maybe the path to figuring out how to sprint, right? Like, so it's maybe that's our lived reality for the both of us. But for me, I think you know this. I'm not sure, but I don't know my dad. So single mom household. I've never met my dad. My siblings are all half siblings of mine. So I just call them my brothers and sisters. I don't distinguish that they are halves, even though we have the same mom, different dad. And they each know their fathers, but I don't know mine. It's a really long story why, and it's a very good thing that I don't. We'll just leave it there. And so I didn't have anything growing up except for mom works. Mom works two jobs. Mom goes to school and works, and we grind it out and figure it out. And money is scarce. So that was my lived growing up reality. And even when my mom was in more serious relationships for a longer period of time, there were probably two boyfriend relationships that were the closest to father figures that I ever had. They were never married, so they never pulled their money together. So while my mom may have had a break between jobs for a spell here or there, it was never like what we're talking about today. So I never saw that. So you could argue that, like, to me, it's crazy to do what we've done in my household as an adult. And Liz grew up on a farm, southern Minnesota. Dad's a farmer and a banker. So like he was a agricultural lender primarily. So farmers would come to his bank. He would figure out if they were bankable, provide them loans to buy equipment or the next land or whatever it may be. That was his whole career for like 45 years, something like that. He worked for a long time in banking, but he was also a farmer. And you might wonder, how do you farm and bank at the same time? And the reality is there's about 6 weeks in the spring and 6 weeks in the fall where it is just gangbusters because you have to farm and you have to do enough to bank. But when you live in a community like that, they understand. And so the bank knows we are the back burner to this farmer's farm right now, right? And so Liz became a huge Minnesota Vikings fan because she got to see dad on Sundays because they knew the Sabbath was sacred and he would be parked in front of the television watching the Vikes. So Liz became a big Vikes fan because that's when she got to spend time with dad, guaranteed. And then her mom was a stay-at-home mom until they were out of the house, and then she was a teacher at a Catholic school where she may as well have been a volunteer, kind of a situation, because they couldn't afford to pay anything appropriate for what a teacher would do. So her lived experience was you have kids, you stay home, you raise them, which I think also set her up to be able to like deal with and appreciate my work experience, which has always been lots of hours. Night calls come in, weekend requirements come up, and you just do what it takes for the job. So because that's what she saw her dad do, it was very normal for her to see me do it. And yeah, that was our lived growing up experience. And I don't know if you have any thoughts there.
I didn't know that Liz's dad was like a farming lender or an agricultural lender. That's so cool. I think that's the first time I heard that about her. Yeah, It's incredible. So apparently her parents were never divorced, always married, it sounds like.
Yeah, still are. They married
Mhm.
later in life. I should know the age, but I also should know their anniversary. I think they're hitting like 40 years of marriage or just did. I should know that, but they don't listen to the show, so they'll never find out that I don't know. But it's somewhere around there.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Okay, so it sounds like very different upbringings versus like Chris and I kind of had sort of similar a little bit, like at least parallels. So that's so interesting. So I guess how do you think that kind of like informed how you guys had a conversation about one of you staying home? Like when when did the I guess when did the topic come up and how were the conversations around it if you remember? I know that was probably a while for you ago.
It has been a while ago, but well before we had Bennett, our general rule was no kids till 30 because we got married at 24. So we're married young. And I always was a stronger earner. And we kind of had this, for whatever reason, I remember bits and pieces, but I remember saying, like, oh, when I make six figures, you can stay home. And like to me, that was just like this giant number. This was back in my Dave Ramsey days. I didn't really know anything beyond just save 15%, work until you're 65, and you'll retire wealthy, right? And so I was like, ah, six figures, you can stay home. We just kind of threw that number out there casually. And something in there informed this conversation that when the time came that we were going to have kids, she would want to stay home for at least something like 3 to 6 months, maybe up to a year to get through like the breastfeeding phase and all of that stuff. And we just kind of laced these conversations in here and there. And we kind of knew in the back of our minds, like we were saving so aggressively that like that would just be a reality that we could live out and it wouldn't be that big of a deal. And then once we knew Bennett was coming, we started planning for it. We started mapping it out and just figured out how to make it work.
So it was kinda always the expectation that she would stay home at some point, and you guys had these conversations for years, it sounds like. Yeah.
Yeah, in bits and pieces, right? Like somewhere along the
Mhm.
way we talked about it here or there, and it just I don't if I'm being honest, like I do see it as like a badge of honor that I was able to provide enough that my wife could stay home. Like that is something that I am proud of, and I also think like knowing that she saw that growing up and how important it was, it just became important to me, and so we found a way to figure it out and make it work. So. But what about you? I mean, you all had to plan for or just deal with Chris's initial time away and then plan for your time away. Like, how did you land on some of those decisions and decide to figure out how to make it work?
Yeah, ours is totally different from yours because we got married when I was 38. Right? Yeah, my 38th birthday. That's like, what age was I? It was February 22nd, 2025, so we're coming up on a year. So when I was 38. So we got married a lot later than you guys, and there was no, like, expectation when we first started dating about, like, staying home or kids or anything, and actually, I think when we first started dating, neither of us wanted kids at that point, and then when we started becoming more serious, we were like, "You know what? Actually, I think raising a family with this person would be really fun." And then, I found out, like, I have fertility issues, like, pretty intense ones, and so the decision to get married was like, "Hey, so I am about to be 38, you're about to be 35, like, we probably need to make this decision sooner rather than later if we wanna have kids," and so we just, like, sped up the timeline and just decided to get married and start trying to have kids, although that's taken like, we got married, like I said, February 22nd, 2025. It is January 27th, 2026 today. We are still not pregnant. Like, that's how long it's been taking. I mean, God, fertility, all you do is wait. Anyway, I'm on a tangent. So the reason why, like, stepping away came up for us, first it was him. This was before we got married, so it was a little bit different because we didn't really plan for him to step away. He just was so unhappy every single day that he was like, "I really wanna quit my job," and I was like and of course me, I'm just a very impetuous person sometimes, and I was like, "Do it." It's like, "Quit your job." And I was working at the the tech company that I just left. So I was making quite a bit of money, and we were living together at that point. And so I was like, I can totally handle paying for the household expenses like while you figure it out. But we never had a plan for what that meant. Like I we never sat down and said, "Okay, you have this much in savings, how long do you want to take this sabbatical for? How much are you going to contribute to the household while we do that?" We never did any of that, and that was a mistake. That was a huge mistake because it did eventually cause me to have some resentment because I'm not going to go into why, but there was just like he wasn't contributing anything to the household financially because we didn't plan for it. And so and I started resenting that. And so, but then he got the job that he has now, which is now allowing me to quit. So when I started talking to him about how much, I was like, I literally wake up dreading going to work. Like there was just this thing that switched. I was moved to a different team at work and then had to stay on that team because I also replaced somebody, and that team and that product was way more stressful than the one that I was on before, and I dreaded going to work every single day. And I also remember this comment Chris made like years before where he was like, "It seems like you don't enjoy your job." It doesn't, and he was like, he didn't mean my job, he meant like my job as a product manager. He's like, "It seems like you don't like doing that." And when he said that, I was like, "Oh my God, he's right." And this is the career I chose for myself. And this is what I'm going to have to do for the next 10 to 15 years. And I just like that was always in the back of my head for years after that. And then it got to this point, and I'm making the most that I've ever made before. I technically on a salary level made more than Chris, but I think when we looked at total comp, we made make the same because his company like gives him a car completely free, like brand new, beautiful Subaru that we love. They like give him school, like they're paying for his master's degree. Like they have 6% match. Like their insurance is way better than ours. Like it's just, you can tell the total comp is probably more than I made actually. And so it was, I started saying these things to Chris, like I don't know if I can go to work anymore. I really want to quit my job. And he was like, then do it. Let's figure out how we can do this. And we actually decided to plan for it this time so that I was like, I really want to make sure there's no resentment. But we did want it to be at first I was like, well, I'll do it just to, be a stay-at-home mom, and I will do it earlier. I'll do it while I'm pregnant so that I don't have to, you know, like worry about this because my pregnancy journey is very different than others. But I told him later, I was like, well, if this fertility stuff doesn't work though, I still don't want to work in this career. And is that okay? And so we had those kind of conversations. It can get really like we had a lot of conversations, so I don't want to get too deep on any of that. So I'm going to pause there and let you like respond.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, planning sounds like the key to almost everything in communication, which is pretty normal. Like, look at oh, what is the saying? The mother of all conflict is typically unmet expectations, and expectations are rarely established. That is a tough one to get out. But so if you think about it, like he didn't want to work anymore. You said go for it. He's like, cool. She's gonna float the bill. This is great. She seemed energetic about it. So what does he do? He wristbanded off and quits. And then you're like, oh, didn't really think about this or that logistic, and it caused some challenges. And congratulations, you learned from it and you figured out how to better prepare for it. And I think it's cool because you took the one step further to say, like, well, if the pregnancy thing carries on for longer, I still probably need more of a break. And I still don't plan on going back to this. So even when I come back, my earnings might be much lower than what we've become accustomed to. And we have to be willing to chat through that and accept that. And it sounds like you drew that conclusion. So I think that's great. And I made a note earlier that I forgot to get back to, but on the resentment comment, you had mentioned something a few minutes back before the resentment comment, but I made a note. I won't name the names, but there's somebody in my life that they work a lot of hours like I do, and their spouse just can't grasp it. And a piece to that puzzle goes back to lived experience growing up. And in their household, what they saw growing up was the the parent worked in a government situation where like the clock stopped at 40 hours and you never thought about work again. And so that's all they ever saw and just don't understand this perpetual grind that it takes in most cases to earn what you earn and what I earn. It's pretty rare you can do it in 40 hours. And it's pretty rare that it doesn't show up after hours or on the weekends. And that's just part of it. So it's really interesting. But I mean, congrats on the planning portion. It's like my planning for Liz to be out of work happened to be really convenient. We planned for about 6 months initially and said we'd figure out if we could do more. And as we had the money set aside, we had the cash all squared away. We knew how we were going to cover insurance. Everything was good to go. And then I think it was, yeah, it was after Bennett was born. We were approaching the 6 month point, and she's like, I can't imagine going back yet. Everything's good. We can keep cash flowing this. Are you fine with it? And I said, we can keep cash flowing it. We may not be able to fully fund a Roth or whatever, and I'm okay with that. She says, okay, great. And I said, so let's decide when you're going to tell your boss or ask to get an extension on your leave. And like 4 days later, boss calls and says, hey, maybe you've read the news, publicly traded company. If maybe you weren't thinking about coming back, would you prefer to get a phone call from HR instead of, coming back? And she's like, I would love to get a call from HR, which translation was, you're about to get laid off, which means you're going to get a package deal and all this stuff. And so the next plan was ride out this phase, get us to a year, year and a half, maybe 2 years, and then you go back to work. And then the reality was she just didn't go back to work because she didn't want to. We didn't need to. And he stayed out of the workforce until Bennett was like 3.5, almost 4 years old. And then she decided she wanted to work again. There were some other goals we were trying to accomplish. He liked being around kids more. And so we went down that path and she went back to work, but still not in a full capacity. I think she went back 5 days for a little while and then quickly to 4 and then eventually to 3 was kind of that next phase. So, and then she got laid off again and she asked if she ever had to go back. And I said no. So she has no intentions of going back to work at this point. But I don't know, there's a lot in there, right? Anything you think there?
Yeah, if anybody wants to retire, just marry a spouse who loves working and then you never have to work again. That's the real retirement goal. And you don't have to be a woman, it could be the other way around too. So, yeah, it's funny because so one conversation we had to have, and I mentioned this in the intro that like I'm gonna be doing some like bonus tell all episodes of like my quitting story. And so I'm not going to get too much into this because there are some things that like I want to keep behind a paywall because I want to be very honest about what happened and like what the people at my job did, like what they said, things like that. So there will be, like I said, I'll be spilling some tea. But it will have to be you'll have to pay for it because I don't want everybody being able to hear those. But one thing that's probably gonna come up in those conversations, but I'll just mention it here anyway, is the idea of paid leave for maternity leave or parental leave. And that's one thing that my company had really good benefit for is they had 12 weeks of full pay. So 12 weeks of 100% salary. And like because my salary was so good, like I think the take home net of that but after, taxes, 401(k), all that stuff was like over $20,000. And my husband and I made the decision to forego that because I was like, I don't know when I will actually be pregnant. And I don't want to have to wait and continue going to this job I hate so much just for $25,000. And I love that we're in a spot where $20,000 is easy to give up in place of like your mental health and freedom, like that is so, because 10 years ago, no, I would have just suffered. I would have just suffered and gone through it. And because 20,000 was like more than I could ever imagine. But we have double that in just like our checking account. I'm not gonna just because and that's because we like have been stuffing it in there and it's like a shared checking, shared savings. So it's really in our savings account and it can go to the checking like anytime type of thing. And so we were like, do we really need this? No. So that was an interesting conversation that we decided to like forgo that for sure because I would have had to work in the job I mean, I'm not even pregnant now. Like I did an embryo transfer in December. It didn't work. And, the next one might not work. Like, who knows? I might not be having a baby until 2027. And so that's a long time to wait. And I literally was waking up every single day dreading working. And so like I just didn't want to do it. And I knew, like, Chris was like, "Well, do you want to try to find another job that you might like?" And I was like, I don't think it's just this company. I think it's the actual work of being a product manager that I don't like. It's so much on one person to do, and usually smaller companies, it's much worse. And it's I was like, I just no, I don't want to find a different job. So anyway, that was a big ramble of stuff. I don't know where I was going with that at all, but
Well, it sounds to me like you again had mapping out discussions, plans. You had a $20,000 nugget out there. Not to mention that's a $20,000 paid period of time, but also all of the earnings you would have had along the way had you grinded it out, right? And sometimes you just have to invest in what's best for you and your mental health and your freedom. And it sounds like you made the choice to do so. And what's interesting is one of the notes that I had for us to chat about was I didn't mean to name it this, but it rhymed and it sounded good, which is to map out the gap. And so that's the lived reality, right? Is if somebody out there is listening to this and thinking like, how could I make this work? That's so much money, that's so much lost income, that's so much whatever. Maybe they're not going to do what you did because they're not burned out like you are. Maybe they can absolutely get up and go every day. They just don't love it. And so they want to earn all the way up until the day that they have a baby come or until they want to take some big trip, whatever the reason is that they want to do this temporary step away from work. And temporary can vary. It could be a number of months, it could be years in your case. It's really quite intriguing to total up what you would have actually net saved in your own cash savings, brokerage accounts, your 401ks, the matches, whatever you were doing before, to actually total that all up during this lost period and then determine, had I continued investing during all this time? Oh, and don't forget to offset the cost of childcare because that's going to offset a lot of your savings rate, right? Take that net number and just throw it into a compounding calculator. And it's kind of wild if you're like, if I keep doing what I was doing, less childcare, and instead I drop it down and I take this break, what's the number in 10 or 15 or 20 years? And I think Jillian Johnsrud does a great job of laying out this concept of like, it's not that expensive to step away from work and take a mini retirement. It's not as expensive as you think. It feels big in the moment, but when you look at if my FI date was, say, 15, 14 years out, 2040, 2040, and you take just a 3 or a 4 year break, maybe 2040 becomes 2042 or 43. But think about the experience you got along the way. Like, that's really powerful to consider. And then maybe you say, like, well, no, I literally can't work past 2040 because, and you've got some reason. Okay, well, maybe you can't work full time past 2040, but maybe you could do something when you get there and you could only draw 2 or 3% off your portfolio instead of 4. You don't need to hit your number. You just need enough. And so I think there is something about mapping out that gap that provides mental freedom. And one other thing I'll say, and then I'll turn it to you to respond to any of that, is I'm doing this in my life right now. Like, I have the lowest savings rate than I've had since I was probably 26 or 7 years old. But it's because I'm minding this gap. I realized I can have my cake and eat it too because I'm all the way to my personal fine number and I have some other goals I'm trying to hit. And my contributions at this point just they aren't significant enough to change when I'm going to hit that number. For me, it's a number of months. Like, if I were to just keep hammering down my contributions, I might be done 6 months sooner. That ain't worth it to me. I'd rather go to Costa Rica and go on this trip and that trip and buy my wife a bougie car and do whatever I want, right? Like, so I get the best of both worlds because time's on my side. So mapping that gap's important. And then, like I mentioned this in our prep, The earlier you make this decision, of course, the more impactful it is because you have more opportunities for your money to have doubled. But the later you are in life, it's even less impactful, or the closer you are to your FI number, it's even less impactful. So map the gap. I don't know. I'm ready to hear. I saw you take a lot of notes, so I'm ready for some wisdom.
Wisdom. Yeah, I like Map the Gap. You're very good at, like, wordsmithing. Okay, so what's your savings right now? Like, you said it's the lowest it's ever been, but what is it?
So I don't know the actual percentage. I just know it's the lowest it's been, but I mean, I put 6% or 8% into my 401k to get the max match, and I max out a Roth IRA backdoor. And I guess I put in a little more than that to actually max out. So I put in 9%. So I mean, it might only be 17% or something. It's really low.
Yeah, but here's what's funny. Here's why I'm asking. Because if it's 17%, so ours is like 12 because he does 6% in the 401k and then they're matching him 6%, right? So that's all we're saving right now. And that's 12%. And that's what I find funny is that is the advice of a normal personal finance guru is like, "Oh, do between 10 and 20, do around 15." So I think it's funny that we're like, "Our savings rate is so low," but we're at, like, the normal savings rate or average or whatever of like a person who's not on the 5 path. So that's why I was kind of bringing it up. I think it's kind of funny.
I'll get out of your way in 1 second. I forgot
Yeah.
I do max out an HSA too. And when you count the company match, I'm probably closer to like 20, 21%. But honestly, I
Yeah.
haven't seen that number since I was like 26 years old.
Yeah, actually, that's a good point. We actually do as well, but I don't really count it because we're going to be pulling directly from it this year anyway. So we're not really counting that as savings because my husband was actually like, "Why are we even putting it in the HSA? Why don't we just put that in cash?" I'm like, "Because then we can pull from it tax free. Like, why wouldn't we?" I was like, "It's just an account we pull from. It's not." We're not saving anything. We're just putting it in there so we can like tax-free pay for baby. So, for mapping the gap for us, that was actually one of the bigger conversations we had with a financial planner. Our financial planner is David Robinson, who has been on the show, friend of the show, real friend of the show, David Robinson. So, he helped us map it out. And so, basically, our job was to look at okay, if Chris goes down to just saving the minimum in the 401k because he was almost maxing out, I think he was like very close to maxing out. And if we reduce his cash savings as well, because he was also putting quite a bit of money in cash savings. And if we, let's not even look at the HSA because we're just going to put money in there and take it back out again. But if we look at all that, what is his net take home after we reduce all of that. Okay, so net take home is around $5,200 a month, which some people might be like, wow, that's really low. Okay, what are you living on now? What are your expenses? Okay, your expenses are 12,000 a month. And I know people are probably like, "What? That's a huge gap." But okay, these were expenses where I traveled like 4 times in a year. Like one of those was to Egypt. Like there was, like, a lot of vet bills, there was also a lot of health stuff in there, and so he was like, "Okay, we need to, like, get these expenses to be a little bit more of a reality." He was like, "Let's put health stuff aside, you have a bucket for that, we're not even gonna count that as, like, your expenses. Obviously, during these years, you're probably not gonna be traveling to Europe and Egypt and stuff like that, like, 4 times a year. No. I am going to 5 events, but trying to do it cheaply." And so we kind of were able to get it down to more like 7 or 8, I think. And I know that sounds like we were just I was paying a lot for traveling. I think I spent like 30 grand on travel last year. It was a lot. And anyway, both of us, because he did some climbing trips and stuff. So we got it down, and then we looked at okay, so what are some expenses that maybe we're not thinking about? Because when you make a lot of money, like the lifestyle creep and just the like not really thinking about every single dollar that's going out of your wallet does kind of creep in. At least it did for me. Like I wasn't really thinking that much about what we were spending on a day to day, like at Target and stuff. I just wasn't really thinking about it, not like I used to when I was making a lot less and had to really watch my pennies. And so I was like, okay, so we could probably cut these areas down. We could do this, that, and the other thing, do some whatever finagling. So we got it down to where the gap between what the expenses are and what his net was around $1,000 a month. And so then we had to be like, okay, how do we bridge the gap? How do we make up for that in savings so that we can pull from savings whenever we need it to bridge that $1,000? And so that was the number we had to come up with. We didn't have to come up with like a phi number. We just had to come up with a number to bridge the gap. And then we also looked at like, okay, what about kids? Like, does that also play a part? And we kind of decided to leave that out of it because we don't really know what the kid expenses will be. We're not going to have childcare, obviously. I'm getting a lot of stuff secondhand. Like, I'm not too worried about the expenses of a child right now. Again, like our HSAs are pretty fat, so like we're going to pay for medical stuff through there. So, not too worried about that. And so we looked at that and we were like, okay, what are our cash savings? And what are the savings that we can pull from that's not retirement accounts? So it could be invested, but it's like brokerage account. And we had quite a bit. And so we, on the like conservative end, have enough money to cover the gap for 7 years. And that's if Chris never gets a raise, never gets promoted, never moves up or whatever in his job. That's if I never go back to work, like for 7 years. And on the like, if we really, we're being optimistic, it's like 11 years. So that's a long time. And so that's kind of like the exercise that we did. But I'll pause there and see if you have anything to say.
FI people are known for being wildly conservative, and
Mm.
that is what just came out of your mouth because you also didn't account for. I know you said you never have a job again, but there's also you could do something part-time at some point along the way when your child is old enough that they're doing other things and you could go do something that stimulates your mind, or that this podcast makes some money eventually and your business makes some money more strongly. Like there's all of those things to help creep in there. So, um, but again, I like how intentional and carefully thought out this all was. And I've said things like this before on some of our recordings together, but sometimes I like to just like take a trip back in time, like 30 years before we had all this fancy stuff and different ways to look at all of this. And like what we're doing is what normal people did 20, 30, 40 years ago before. I feel like America has just gone on a binge like we've never seen before. Any developed country has gone on binging like we've never seen before. And so, like, the simple way of saying all of this 30 years ago was advice you get from your grandparents is buy only so much house that you could pay for it with one income. And that way, whenever you do only have one income, your spouse can stay home. Like it's that simple, right? I also heard a theme in there that reminds me of like the Ramit Sethi mindset of like the whole latte factor being a joke, like don't worry about it. And you and I, like our households, we have that privilege where we don't have to think about the latte. It does not make a difference. That's why your Target trips are what they are. We joke about it all the time. I'm not allowed to go to Target because if I go to Target, the bill goes up by 30%. Because I'm like, and I want that. And I need buffalo sticks. And it's like, I haven't had a buffalo beef stick in my house in 5 years, but I went to Target today and I saw them, and the bill just goes up and up and up because you can have creep because it doesn't matter because you're doing the big things right. The heavy lifting is taking care of itself. And now you're making a choice to step back and you do have to mind that gap. And I forget who said it. I think it might have been Jillian Johnsrud may have said it that poor people are the best with their money because they know what day Comcast is drafting. They know when their phone bill is going out. Like they're very on top of every dollar having a place. And we all have to be there to get started, but eventually we get to enjoy this point that you and I have been at, assuming we grow our wealth accordingly. And it's freeing. It's completely freeing. It's very fun. But then you have to come back to earth when it comes time to plan this time period. And so good for you all doing that. I think it's the right move. It makes perfect sense. And a 7 year runway. That's a conservative 7 year runway. That's amazing. Congrats on that. That's so exciting. Good on you.
That's not even taking into account, like, Chris's bonuses either, and he gets a bonus every quarter. It's because bonuses aren't necessarily guaranteed, you don't know how much they are, so we're just like, "Let's just, like, ignore those." Yeah, and we're still putting 12% towards retirement, and we don't
Mhm.
even need to do that, but it's like, why would we forgo the 6% match? Like, that's stupid. So, yeah, that's the thing. That's what's so funny about this is Chris took his sabbatical, and because he took his sabbatical and for how long he did it, he found this job, this gold mine of a job that he has right now, which is he works from home too. So like he doesn't have an office that he goes to. They give him a car that like I said, the health insurance is amazing. They're paying for his master's degree. Like he just his job is so incredible. Now he has said like it's not the most invigorating and enjoyable job that he's ever had. Like the ones where he's just like every day really wanting to go and really wanting to do everything that he does. Like it's he said it's fine. He's like I like it. It's fine. It's not he doesn't hate it or anything, but he's like I'm not sitting there, yay, I get to work today, like he's kinda in a, "Sure, I get to work today, I guess," and but anyway, I'm just gonna say right now, we are extremely privileged. Yes, yes, we've both worked hard, yes, but I am going to recognize, like, the privilege that we have is, like, over the top, and so I don't want anybody listening to this thinking like, "Well, I don't have that kinda job," or I don't have a spouse, so I can't just, retire on my spouse, and so I get that, and so it's just that's why we're just sharing what we have done, like Mitch and I have done. We understand not everybody can do this, but maybe some of you could and you maybe haven't thought about it yet and you can see how we did it. So, yeah. I see you came off mute, Mitch, but I did want to ask you if you wanted to move on to like the expectations of who does what after the person quits or if you have something else to say before we move on to that topic.
Just right before we get to that, on the privilege comment, which I think is completely accurate. It's yes, we've worked hard, but yes, we also found ourselves in the right spot and grew and developed in all these things. Born in the right place at the right time, all those things, right? I think too many people let their egos get in the way of accepting that there is some privilege paired with luck surface area that kind of comes together for us. But what I want to mention is the reason our lifestyles crept was because our incomes went up. And if I look back 10 or 12 or 15 years when my income it was still more than my wife's, but it wasn't like I was some gangbusters earner at 26, 27 years old. I was having a good life. I still enjoyed my life. We just enjoyed it in different ways. And then as we earned more, we were able to do some of these more crazy lucrative things. But I am convinced that if my income had not had exponentially grown, I think I'd look a little more like a traditional FI person where I drive a beater of a Prius from 2012 or whatever it is that you drive.
Shut your mouth.
And I just live a simpler life, right? And it would be completely fine, but because of where we are, we were able to allow our scope of life to creep. So,
You will hold on. You will be happy to know that this company car that my husband gets in 3.5 years, we are going to be able to buy it from the fleet company,
mm,
which by the way, if you buy from a fleet company, like it's like you buy it at cost or like the Kelly Blue Book value, and then there's no like dealer fees or anything. So it's really cheap. So that's our plan to replace my car. Even if my car is still working by then, we're just gonna do that just so that we have peace of mind and like it's gonna be such a good deal. Like that we're not gonna be able to pass it up, and he's gonna get a new company car, and so we'll just have that. So, I won't have a beater anymore in 3.5 years, if that makes you feel better.
well, fantastic. But yeah, I think the next piece that you kind of poked at there is who does what, when, and why, I think is so important because again, going back to that mother of all conflict is unmet expectations, and unmet expectations are often expectations that were never communicated. It is just so important that we know who does what and when, so that there's not this expectation that something is going to be done by the other person. And I think this is important in all aspects in all phases of life, but certainly in this situation. So, like, people will ask Liz all the time, "Don't you ever get bored?" And she's like, "No, I've got a very full life," and she has all these things that she does. And I am chained to this desk 45-ish hours a week. I often work a little bit on the weekends, and I'll take calls when they come in after hours, whatever it may be. And I'll also walk upstairs today, somewhere between 12:30 and 1:30 this afternoon, and my wife will be sitting up there on the couch with a cold brew coffee, watching trash TV or reading a book. And it would be easy for someone in my situation to be like, "Oh, that patio door glass could be cleaner, we just ran out of food," like it could be easy to think that, but like that's not the reality, right? It's like we have these mapped out understandings of who does what and when and how so that we just know. And so one of the things in our house is Liz runs our personal life like that. She is the absolute queen of the household. I have my chores I do around here. I do like all the outdoor stuff, snow, lawn, anything to do with making sure our grass is reasonably green. I take out trash and recycling throughout the week regularly. And I like deep clean our bathrooms once a week. So we have new bathrooms and they still look brand new from like a 2, 3 years ago because I clean them meticulously every week. Like those are Mitch's things. And then she has all these other things that she does, right? Like plans her personal life and just knowing like certain things will come up and we'll kind of look at each other and go, that sounds kind of like a you thing. And she's like, yeah, it's probably a me thing. And she does it, and other times she'll kind of look at me and be like, I kind of need you to carry that torch, and like there's a little hesitancy to ask me because of the balance of our time or whatever it may be. But it's just, I think it's super important to understand and know that like all of her stuff is going to get done. And when my day ends at 5, her day begins in some ways of like, now it's time to go do this errand, or now it's time to make dinner for everyone. And I get Saturdays and Sundays 97% off, but she still makes our 4 meals, like, so she's always on in fits and spurts. And I'm just on heavy during the work week. And so, like, finding that balance and knowing who does what and when, I think is super important.
How long did it take y'all to get to that homeostasis? Because like, it's only 25 days in for us, and we're definitely not there yet. So, how long did that take?
It's hard to say. Like, so when we went to marriage counseling, okay, we got married in 2010, which means we went to marriage counseling in early 2010. And we took this test where like a 1 is very unlikely and a 5 is very likely, right? And the marriage counselors came away with two things. They said, one, Mitch is extreme on everything. And Liz, you're pretty much like, she was always a 2 or a 4, and I was always a 1 or a 5. But they thought it was hilarious because if she was a 4, I was a 5. And if she was a 2, I was a 1. So thankfully, we're always on the same scale. So like,
Okay, so you're on the same
yeah,
wavelength, just you were extra.
absolutes. Yeah, I am an absolutes person, black and white. And they said the second thing is you guys are like laser aligned on nearly everything except for, and there were like three things. They're like, so we have 7 weeks of marriage counseling and we're going to be done in like 2 weeks. What do you want to do? And that's as much as I remember. And I tell you that story because like we really did define going into our marriage who was going to do what. And like when we were dating, Liz would come over to my house because we didn't live together. She'd come over to my house and there'd be a pile of clothes. And she'd kind of look at it sideways and be like, is that all clean? Yep. How long has it been sitting there? I don't know. When are you going to fold it? No intention to. Like, well, what do you do when you wear that wrinkly shirt? Throw it in the dryer, 3 ice cubes, let it run for 10 minutes. And when I get out of the shower, I put it on. And it was moments like that where she's like, I can't tolerate that. So therefore, like, I will take care of your laundry. What are you going to do in exchange? And we just kept like horse trading tasks and figured out who likes doing what best, and anything you hate the most, you tried to avoid. And so like we went into marriage mostly understanding who was doing what in those capacities. And then when it came child time and she was staying home, you just have to figure out how to win in the margins. And so I had to pick stuff up because she was way more involved than he was. So how long? I don't know. But that's kind of how we landed there.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I think I mentioned this before recording, and I said I don't wanna dive into this too deep before recording because I wanna talk about it on the show. that one thing that's this is brand new for me, but, like, the initial feelings that I was having, that did kinda coincide with, like, my embryo transfer not working, so, like, that I definitely was very sad. So that basically I found out on December 29th. I was supposed to leave work on January 9th, and I just told them, "No, I can't." I could barely function. I was so sad, and so I said, "I need my last day to be January 2nd." I actually kinda Irish goodbyed because nobody was working that week still. It was, like, the 2 weeks of the holidays. So, no like, there was only, like, 2 people who knew I left early. So I just kinda, like, messaged people on Slack and said, "Hey, by the way, I'm leaving, early. I probably won't see you. So sorry, but I liked working with you, blah, blah, blah." So, anyway, but my feelings were I felt because like, this is a weird way of saying this, but I was like, the point of Megan was to either be working and making that money or to be pregnant and focusing on pregnancy. Like that was what was in my head. And now that wasn't true because that's why we were coinciding like my quitting with the embryo transfer because we were like, "Oh, I'm going to be pregnant so I can focus on pregnancy." Now that's not true. We actually also decided to do some follow-up testing, so I'm still not like, this cycle that I'm going through right now, we didn't do another transfer, we did testing instead, and so I'm still probably not gonna get pregnant until, like, end of February, and so right now, I feel very useless, and I know that that's not, like, a reality. Obviously, people are useful or worthy just existing, right? Like you can exist as a lump on the couch and you're still a worthy human being. It's very hard to untie my mindset from that though because of how society sets us up for like, oh, you're only worthwhile if you're being productive in some capacity, whether that's raising a child, doing something around the house, whatever. And so but I couldn't really bring myself to, like, focus on doing things. I wasn't there yet, and so I told Chris, I was like, "I would really like to just take January to just not do anything." Like and it's not do anything, but just not plan to do anything. Like, if something comes up during the day and I want to do it, then I'll do it. The only thing I think I kept as, like, a plan were gym sessions, gym classes, stuff like that, because that brought me joy. So but I didn't wanna plan like, "Okay, on this day, I'm gonna be working on the podcast. On this day, I'm gonna clean this room. On this day, I'm gonna declutter. On this day, I'm gonna go garden." Like, I didn't wanna do that. I wanted it to be like, I'm gonna wake up, I'm gonna look at see, if there's a gym class today, that's what I have to plan around. Is there a doctor's appointment today? That's what I have to plan around. Otherwise, I'm only gonna do things if I feel called to do it. And he was like, "Yeah." He was like, "I did that for 6 months." He's like, "I'm not even sure 1 month is enough for you to do." He's like, "I feel like that should just be, like, what you do." So so I think it helps that he did a sabbatical before me because he can like, completely relate to what I'm going through right now and how I'm feeling, at least on the level of, like, I left my job and now I feel useless. He can't obviously relate to, like, I'm not pregnant when I thought I was gonna be pregnant. Like, he can relate on a certain level, but not at the same level. But that's kind of what has been going through my mind. And so we have not set up any sort of like, I'm going to do this and he's going to do this. Like we kept the same, I guess, tasks that we always do. He mostly does the litter boxes, for instance. I don't touch those. I just don't think about it. He can, like, smell it and I can't. I don't know, it's very weird. I'm also not supposed to now, like, even though I'm not pregnant, like, you're really not supposed to if you're trying either, so I now have a real excuse. He also, like, feeds the cats, like, he does that kinda stuff, like, he so we never really he cooks too, like, he loves cooking, so he just does that. So we never really had a conversation like, "How do we need this to change?" Like, he still does everything, but yet he's, like, working and going to school and still doing all this stuff. So now I'm feeling guilty, and he's like, "No, no, 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 no. You did this because you needed rest, so you need to take the rest." And he was like, "I will tell you if I'm, like, feeling overwhelmed or whatever, and we'll have a conversation. It's fine." And we have. He actually had to drop a class because he was getting too overwhelmed, so now he's just doing one class. But That was kind of a rambly way of saying, like, it is sometimes difficult to get to that homeostasis, and if anybody's listening to this and is like, "How do we do this?" I wouldn't expect you to get to it immediately, and just having the open, honest, and also kind conversations with your partner, because I feel like when you say open and honest, it's like, don't be honest for honesty's sake, like, still be kind in your honesty, But having those conversations, I think, is the best way to deal with one spouse, like, not working and the other one working, is continuously having those conversations. Because if something changes, if you start feeling resentful about something, it's much better to bring it up than to just sit on it and stew.
Yeah. Uh, I think all of that, first and foremost, is okay. I'm glad that you somewhere in there landed on like, this is kind of what you'd expect. Like a month might not be enough. And in the fitness world, they sometimes say rest is part of recovery and part of progress. So like you can't just work out hard 7 days a week. Like your muscles need time to decompress, to relax, for the minor tears to heal, to be able to build back up. And that's part of the game. And the same is true with the entirety of our bodies, right? Like we are tired, we are worn out. You just got done going through these mental gymnastics for however long of, I don't know how much longer I can do this. And then finally you got to rip the band-aid off. It would be crazy to think that you just wake up on day 1 or 2 or 3 and have just be like, I figured it out. I had 3 days off and now I know these are my things and these are the things I'm going to pull from him. And I would actually like it if he did that instead. Like that would be like wildly unique, I think. And so, yeah, rest is part of recovery. So enjoy it, embrace it, and accept it for as long as you can. And I think you'll find yourself finding your way towards the tasks and things that you otherwise wouldn't have wanted to do because you have the free space. And the more you figure out your structure, the more you'll be able to plan, like, oh, okay, I like doing this thing better before lunch to just get it out of the way. And I like doing these things after I get home from the gym because I'm already gross and dirty. So, like, why not do this thing now? And then when I shower, I can handle this other thing, or that's when I'm going to sit and read, or whatever it may be. But let the mind decompress, let it begin to draw those new neural patterns, understanding the new lived reality. And if anybody needed anything practical, this is not something I do, but I remember Joe Saul-Sehy saying, I don't know if he does this every week, but I know that he and his wife, I think it's Saul-Sehy. Anyway, they have a conversation about once a week, and one of their weekly check-in meeting questions is, what's one thing I could start doing this week to make things better, and what's one thing I could stop doing to make things better? And the significant other gets to, answer and say, I could use your help with this instead of that. And it would be really nice if you stopped doing this, right? And I thought, what an interesting moment to invite feedback every week. So if somebody needed something practical to try, that's a pretty reasonable thing to consider trying. The only other thing I want to mention, and this is really true in my world, I'm not sure how true it is in your world, but again, going back to the like resentment thing, I think there is just a dual responsibility in relationships, not to do it out of obligation, but like to genuinely and authentically communicate the things that your spouse does well. And I don't think there is I think that's great saying it one to one, but something that I don't know who started it or how it became a thing or if it just authentically came out of Liz and I, but with our situation, again, I'm chained to the desk and she's got her realities in life, right? And like when we're at social gatherings, whether it's family or friends or a blend of both, people will like ask her like, don't you ever get bored all day? And she's like, oh, I have a really full life. She's like, this is the best ever. Mitch works, he does his thing, and then boom, she rifles off her life that she goes on 60 or 90-minute walks every day. She goes to a crazy bodybuilding fitness gym that she's like just learning how to lift weights and get stronger for her PRs. And then like next to her are these people that are like jacking up huge weights. It's really funny. She's like, I go do that and I read and I work my way through these other chores and tasks and just like I get to take my time doing everything. Like I have a really fulfilling life, like it's really nice to hear that. Like that I am able to provide for her what she would consider to be like the best life. And she's like, I have no desire to go back to work. And it's wonderful. And My side on the flip side, same thing, public setting, group settings, whatever. Liz is a wizard in the kitchen. She's a food scientist. She's a trained pastry chef. Like she is a an absolute squared away person in the kitchen. And so people will be eating what we eat, and they're like, "How are you not 300 pounds?" That's the go to, right? And I'm like, well, not only is like Liz incredible at what she does, but like in my freezer, I always have what I call freezer treats, and they're mostly paleo or like keto type ingredients that like you can eat this bar and it's not like eating a little Debbie cosmic brownie, right? Same size, very different result on the body. And like what you're eating that you love so much, it's real food with real ingredients. And like she knows how to make it be absolutely incredible. So, like, Liz runs our personal life. She takes care of all the things to make it so that I can do the things that I do so that she can have what she has. And it's just a big teamwork cycle. And I just think there is something to it when you're finding your way into this like new balance of life where, again, it's not just staying at home and it's not just being chained to the desk. We both have our parts in this. And I think what comes out of it is when the free hours are out there and you're both free, because Liz serves me in all of her ways and because I serve her in all of her ways, when we're both free at the same time, I think we're both more free, like mentally, and able to be there, be present, and enjoy. And that's a powerful thing. So that's my that's my last thought of the day.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, I wish I could give people like practical advice on how Chris and I have these conversations, but honestly, it's like one of us thinks of it and is like, "Hey, can I talk to you?" And then we just talk about it. Like it's not there's never like a planned like we do it at the, in the morning or we do it at this time of day or we do it on this day. Like we do it when we think about it. I think it helps that we're both here at the house all the time, and so that really helps. But yeah, I it's funny that Liz says that she's not bored because I have definitely found that I have been getting bored, but I like it. I'm like, "Yeah, I'm getting bored," because who can say they have the privilege and, like, ability to have the kind of space to get bored as an adult in this world today. Not very many people, right? Like boredom is a kid thing. And I always envy kids for that because I'm like, you're bored. That means that like you don't have a lot that you have to worry about right now, you know? So there are moments where I'm like, I'm kind of bored. And then I'm like, okay, so what do I want to do? And then I get to choose. And it makes whatever I choose that much more enjoyable, if that makes sense, because I was, like, bored in that moment. I don't know, and maybe I need to lean into the boredness a little bit more and just sit with it and, like, see what happens, but right now I'm still in that, like, "I need to be productive." So I do that. One thing that I've been doing is, like, hunting down, like, bargain baby stuff on Facebook Marketplace, like, that's been, like, my job for the last couple weeks because it just makes me feel better, and, like, I think I've gotten everything we need except for, like, crib, stroller, car seat because those are being bought new just for safety reasons. I think I've have everything that we will need up until this child is, like, 1 years old, and I think I got it for, like, a couple $100. I'm not even kidding. Like, Facebook Marketplace is the best.
The
So
best.
it's such the best the for baby stuff, not for other stuff. Everything else is crap, but I think that's what I'll well, yeah, because I just Mitch just, like, opened his mouth like, "What?" I
I don't think you're using
I'm not
Facebook
good.
Marketplace right.
Well, I've tried to sell stuff on there and it sucks, so and then, like, other people I've tried to I don't buy anything else on there usually because, I don't know, I just haven't looked at it, but maybe I will, so, I don't know. But baby stuff, yeah, there's a lot, and moms to other moms are the nicest, like, they're just so kind, and, like, half the time they'll be like, "Yeah, you can just grab it off my porch whenever you want." Like, it's very trusting, it's very interesting. It is a little weird when I walk up and they're like, "How far along are you?" Because then I'm like, "Well, I'm not pregnant yet. We're doing fertility treatments." I just leave it at that, and then they don't ask any more questions. Usually, they're just like, "Oh, I'm so sorry," and then I could just, like, walk away. Because I was like, "Should I, like, lie and say I'm, like, 8 weeks or something?" I was like, "No, I don't wanna do that." So, Anyway, I just rambled. I guess that'll be my last statement of the episode is that rambling mess.
'Cause
I'm
I
not
got
as
bothered that you
eloquent.
were all because I
Yeah.
was bothered that you were hating on Facebook Marketplace. Like,
I know, I know, I
I
know.
transact on there about once a month on average, either buying or
Yeah.
selling something, and, you have to be patient is the key, and there's gotta be enough in it. The juice has to be worth the squeeze for me, like, that's the way it works, so but, yeah,
Yeah.
this is a fun
Fair.
discussion. I hope people enjoyed it
Yeah.
because there's a lot of different perspective in here, and I think it'll help set people up to think through, plan, and prepare.
Yeah, and like we said, we're only talking about this from our own perspectives. I'm not giving any sort of advice like this is exactly what I think other people should do. Absolutely not. Like your life isn't like mine. Your life isn't necessarily like Mitch's, but maybe there's something in here that relates to you or something that might have sparked something or maybe you can go and look at your own map the gap number, see what that is and see if maybe you are this kind of coast fi that's a little bit different from like baristify. So yeah, hope it helped you guys and thanks for listening. Thanks Mitch for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me, it was fun.
Thanks for listening to the show. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to hit subscribe and leave a quick rating. Also, hit up my Patreon at patreon.com/everydayfi podcast for ad-free and bonus content coming in 2026. I'm Megan Combs, and I'll see you next time on Everyday Fi.